Hello, welcome to Stories in Time. My name is Ellouise Schoettler. I'm a storyteller. Oh, the colors are coming out on the trees. The wind is getting a little bit colder, and we know that Halloween and other things are coming up. And this time of the year just calls for certain kinds of stories. And I've got one for you today. A number of years ago, my husband and I took our adult children with their children down to Tennessee into the Blue Ridge Mountains. Oh, it was absolutely beautiful, and there were a lot of stories down there. And one that I found, some folklorists had looked into this whole area, and they picked up one to tell about the area. When that place, they changed the national park. They changed the town down there into a national park. And there were stories. So these people were walking around looking to people. They came upon two old women sitting on the porch. And they let her know that they were looking for good stories. I've got a good story. She said that to them. I've got a good story. I can tell you one. This is coming on toward Halloween, and I can show you a story right from this place, Cave Cove. Well, we sat down, and we started to write down as she told us the story. I'll tell you about Avis S. Stepp. Avis S. Stepp was born up in these regions. She was born on a thunderstorm. Lightning flashed and she came forth into this world. That's how she was born. And she knew, and everybody else did, that anybody that was born like she was fated to die from the lightning. So she was scared of lightning, frightened to death, and she protected herself. She did. She protected herself. From the time she was a little girl, she protected herself from anything metal. If there was a storm brewing, she wouldn't touch it. Even needles and thread, which she wanted to use, she loved from the time she was a little girl. She loved to sew. But if it was storming and if lightning was popping, she wouldn't touch a needle. Well, she grew up, she was a pretty young woman, and she got married. That S. Stepp boy, she married him. And they were good for each other. They were happy. They were good. He didn't mind not having a metal bed because she just wouldn't have a metal bed in the house. That was all right with him. And one night in that house, was close to Christmas, they had a terrible argument, almost a fight. They had a terrible argument. They were coming on toward Christmas, and Mavis was trying to make the plans for what they would do on Christmas night, which church they would go to. And she mentioned a name, and he said, I won't go there to that preacher, not ever again. And that started the fight. He was wearing a red wool shirt that his mother had made for him. And he stalked around the rooms. He got madder and madder. And as she looked over there, there was a blue streak coming out of his mouth. She had never heard those kinds of words coming out of his mouth. It must be that red shirt that's causing this, she thought. So when the fight was over and they had made up, she took that shirt away without his knowing it, folded it, and put it in a box in the bottom of the closet. She didn't want to ever see that shirt again. And she never did, and nobody ever knew where the shirt went because they weren't looking. She had made a quilt, a white quilt with little red squares at all the corners. That was his shirt that was now part of the quilt. And she used to laugh and tell people, oh, I love this one. This is the cussin' cover. And the cussin' cover kept them so warm in the wintertime, even if snow was heavy on the roof. They always were warm if they were sleeping under that. Oh, yes. Well, it was a sad story. It really was. Mavis got sick when she was pretty young. They had children. She got sick and she died. Young, and she died. Well, it went along, so just went along. They didn't know in the town what would happen to the children and to her husband. But 6 months after she died, he married another woman, a younger woman, a woman from that town. She wasn't particularly pretty. She had some flesh on her body. She was a big, big girl. She couldn't cook. She couldn't sew. She couldn't do anything, we thought, except keep an old man warm in the night, especially if they were sleeping under the cussin' cover. When they got married and she moved into the little house, the first thing she wanted was a metal bed. He had promised Mavis that he would never put a metal bed in that house. She had asked for that promise, and he had promised. And she had asked for another promise, which you'll give all my quilts to the children, to our children. But this new bride, what do you think was her favorite quilt? The cussin' cover. And she took that to sleep under every cold night. Wouldn't you know it? Wouldn't you just know that would happen? One night, they were under the covers, on the metal bed, under the cussin' cover. And in the middle of the night, she woke up. She heard a noise in the room, and she woke up, and she sat up in the bed, and there, standing at the foot of the bed, was a woman. She reached over and touched her husband and shook his shoulder, and he was too asleep to wake up. And she said, wake up, wake up. There's somebody here. Don't you hear him? No, I don't hear nothing. Well, I hear something. I see something. There's a woman standing at the foot of this bed. And she looks like your old wife did. She's got long, stringy hair. And she's wearing a white nightgown from her neck to the floor. Who do you think? I don't know. Well, did you look? No, I ain't done nothing. You ain't done nothing. You tell her to get out of here, that you're my man now, and to get out of here and to go to wherever she goes to go home. And he flopped back and went back to sleep, and she laid back down. But the next thing she knew, she heard like an explosion nearby. And he sat up, and he looked down there, and it was Mavis. And he thought, I feel hot here. I feel like there's a fire here. And there was a fire. There was a fire. Well, she fell out of the bed. She was so startled, she fell out of the bed, and she ran out. She did. She ran out, and she ran down the road till she got to her daddy's house, where her brothers were, and she needed some help. They were in a fire at her house. That's what she thought. She heard him say, fire, fire. And so her father and her brother came back up to the house. And as they got there, they looked up, and everything looked so quiet, just quiet, except for the one thing that was a little different. That coming out of the chimney was just sort of a little trindle of smoke, white smoke, circling up into the sky. They went inside, her father and her brother. It was cold. Oh, it was so cold in there. And they turned and they looked. That metal bed must have gotten red hot because it had burned right through the floor, fallen down onto the ground. And there on the top, you won't believe this, there on the top of that bed, there was Mavis's husband, burned up, cooked, right there on the bed, cooked by whatever fire came in there. The brother was walking around wrapped up in something white with little red squares on it. It had been on the bed, but now it had also been folded in the corner, and it wasn't scorched, not one bit. The next morning, we all saw each other. We did. We talked. We weren't a big town. We weren't even a town. We were just a place. And we all knew each other. And we talked about it. And everybody said the same thing. We didn't hear any rumbling the night before. We didn't hear any thunder. I didn't even hear any raindrops last night. And when we talked about it, we whispered, I know who did that. I know who killed him. Mavis did it. Mavis came back and killed him. And that's what we thought. That's what I still think. How's that for a story? Thank you for listening.